All right, I will say good morning. Let us continue. We're continuing Mesillas Hashem today in Perek Chof, chapter 20, Mesillas Yesharim. So the Ramchal writes as follows: V'hinei, mashetzarech lahavin. One has to understand ki ein ladon divrei Chassidus al pi Ma'arian Arishon. So this is an incredible idea. The Ramchal says that sometimes a person can't judge Chassidus at first glance. Now, we're going to see what the Ramchal is really highlighting over here is that sometimes at first glance, what appears to be an act of Chassidus is not. And therefore, you can remember that the entire essence of this parak is b'mishkala Chassidus, weighing. What is Chassidus? What is not Chassidus? So he says, "Ela tzarich la'ayin l'sponin ad heichon toldo samaisem magios." I will say this is incredible. Sometimes, in order to know if something is an act of personal piety, something is an act of Chassidus, it's not just enough to look at what the act is now, but you also have to look at where the act is going to go. Right? Where is the act? Where is the act ultimately going to lead to? Sometimes an action itself could look good. And so sometimes something could be good in the short term. It could be good. But what will come from it ultimately is negative. And therefore, again, a person has to abstain from such an action. And if a person were to perform that action, we're going to give examples of this, but it's really an incredibly profound idea. So you could have something that right now in the present, looks like a form of piety, looks like a form of Chassidus. But the repercussions or the results of this are going to be something negative. In which case, it's not Chassidus anymore. It's not Chassidus, rather just the opposite. It actually becomes a Maisa Aveira. Pretty incredible. V'hinei, he gives examples of this. Maisa Gedalia ben Achikam Gali Leinenu. So he tells the story of Gedalia ben Achikam. Rabbi say, who was Gedalia ben Achikam? So this was after Yerushalayim was destroyed, first temple era. Gedalia ben Achikam was installed as governor of, we'll call it Judea, governor of Yehuda, by the Babylonians. So what happened? So Meirov Chasiduso Shelo Ladun as Yishma Lekav Chova O Shelo Kiba Lashon Hara Amar Li Yochanan Mekerech Sheker Ater Dover Al Yishmael. But listen to this. So Gedalia ben Achikam was the governor. He was in charge of the Jewish people in the aftermath of the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash. What happened? He received a report. What was the report he received? He received a report from Yochanan ben Kareach. Yochanan said, Gedalia, there is a credible threat against your life by this guy by the name of Yishmael. Right? Yishmael is out to come and kill you. What happened? Gedalia got the intel. What did he do? He said, I can't listen. It's Lashon Hara. Can't listen. It's Lashon Hara. At first glance, he said to himself, oh, that's beautiful. He was so careful about Lashon Hara. Only one problem. The report was true, and Gedalia ben Achikam was assassinated. Remember, the assassination of Gedalia ben Achikam represented a fundamental end to any form of Jewish autonomy or Jewish self-determination in Eretz Yisrael at the end of this first temple era. So what do you see from here? Magaram, because Gedalia would not listen, Garam Shemesu v'nifrazu Yisrael. Ultimately, he's assassinated. Any remnant of the Jewish people is now scattered. The remaining embers of Jewish life in Eretz Yisrael were extinguished. Not only that, Gedalia ben Achikam is held accountable or held culpable for the Jews who were killed in the aftermath of his assassination. Kilu Hargam was if Gedalia himself killed them. So I'll say, so again, watch what's happening over here. Gedalia ben Achikam, who is the governor of Judea, receives a credible threat against his life. He decides not to listen to it because he says it's Lashon Hara. So I'll say, so you say to yourself, is it good to abstain listening from Lashon Hara? Is it good? Is it a good thing? Absolutely. Is it a form of Chassidus? Absolutely. The problem was Gedalia ben Achikam was only looking at the act through the prism of the present and not thinking about the possible future repercussions of his actions. So what he thought was an act of personal piety i.e., I'm not going to listen to Lashon Hara, was foolish. It was foolish. And in fact, in the eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even considered to be sinful. Because since he had a responsibility towards the greater community, he had an obligation to be mindful of this report and to go ahead and listen attentively to what this guy, Yochanan ben Kareach, was saying. And his failure to do so is not only misplaced piety, but ultimately, again, considered to be culpability. And I will say, so understand what Ramchal, and this, I want to point out, this is Maisim B'chol Yom. Maisim, I will say, I'll give you just a simpler example of it. And it happens, right? Erev Shabbos, you're running late. Everybody's running late. It happens, right? And what happens, right? You leave the house without saying a Shabbos to your wife, or you start yelling at everyone, right? Move, Shabbos, right? You're throwing rocks at people, right? All kinds of things, right? Because you're about Shabbos. You're about Shabbos. That's not piety. That's not piety. I'm sorry? Speeding down 7 Mile Lane, absolutely right. Are you looking at me about that? Oh, okay, good. And so there's no piety in that. There's no piety, and so many times we get so wrapped up in our own stuff, right? I think like I'm being pious, I'm being holy, and meanwhile, in the process of like my holiness, first of all, I may be totally trampling on other people, that's not piety. That's not piety. That's tunnel vision. And that's what Ramchal is describing over here. Because sometimes people get so wrapped up in their own stuff, what I think is good, that I totally don't understand the collateral damage that's happening around me, both in terms of other people, ben adam machabero, and also in terms of my own life. Kedai ben Achikam, again, thinks he's being pious by not listening to Lashon Hara. Meanwhile, he's just paved the way, he's opened the door for destruction. And Ramchal gives another example of this, of Abayis Hasheni, another example of Second Beis HaMikdash. Gamhu Charavai de Chasidus Kazeh was also destroyed because of this type of misplaced piety. Asher lo nishkal b'mishkal tzedek, which was not properly weighed. B'maisid bar Kamsa. We know the story of Kamsa and bar Kamsa. So what happened again? Bar Kamsa got upset that he wasn't invited to the party. So remember again, he decides to take revenge on the Jews. How does he take revenge on the Jews? He goes to the Caesar. He says, Mardu b'cha Yehudai. The Jews have rebelled against you. So he shows, how can I show you that the Jews have rebelled against you? Send the Jews a carbon, and you'll see they're not going to offer it up. They're not going to offer it up. So the Gemara says, so what happens? So the Caesar sent the carbon. So Bar Kamsa split the lip of the carbon. Split the lip, right? In a way that would be clear that the Jews would not offer it up. So what happened? The carbon arrives in the Beis HaMikdash. Yomru. So now what happens? So the other sages all agree, listen, you got to offer this up. When the Caesar sends a carbon, you offer it up. You offer it up, because if you don't offer it up, literally it's a death sentence. So there was a Gadol Hador who was there, Zechariah ben Avkolos, and he says, Yomru, Bali Mumin Kraven Legabe Mizbeach. So Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolos said, no, you can't offer that up, because if you offer it up, people are going to think that you could offer up blemished animals in the Beis HaMikdash. Fine. So they said, fine, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolos, you won't offer it up. So what should we do? I'm Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolos. So they said, let's kill Bar Kamsa. Bar Kamsa is a Moser. Bar Kamsa is a person who has handed over the Jewish people to a despotic Gentile government. He deserves death. Amar B'Zechariah ben Avkolos. Yomru matil bumba kachmi hari. You can't do that, because people will say that why is he being executed? Because he made a blemish in a carbon. And the people are going to think that the penalty for making a blemish in a carbon is what? Is death. So, benkach ubenkach, halach osa rasha vehilshin es Yisrael. So both say, so now, what ended up happening? So Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolos would not let them offer up the carbon. So Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolos, why? Because again, he felt that there would be, people are going to walk away with the wrong impression, that you could offer up blemished animals. They wanted to kill Bar Kamsa. You can't kill Bar Kamsa. People are going to think that what? That a person who inflicts a mum on a carbon is worthy of death. So what happens? What do they do with the Bar Kamsa? Nothing. What do they do about the Caesar's carbon? Nothing. So Bar Kamsa goes back, tells the Caesar, I told you, they're not even offering up your carbon. And what happened? The Caesar came and he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. And this is what Rabbi Yochanan said He said, "An v'sanusal sh'Rabbi Zechariah hechrivu es beisenu v'sarfa es hechalenu v'haglasanu lebein ha'umos." The humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkalos destroyed our Beis Hamikdash, incinerated our heichal, and caused us to be exiled. And I will say that is a dramatic statement, because understand over here, understand what Chazal are saying. It was Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkalos' fault that everything happened. I will say, now I just want to point out, the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of sinas chinam. Right? That the Gemara is explicit about. So how does Rabbi Yochanan lay blame to Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkalos? Because I will say, it was his misplaced chasidus. His misplaced chasidus that ultimately, again, triggered the process. He didn't cause it, it was caused, but it was his misplaced chasidus. That's not Ramchal. I will say, I want to point out that I've always felt very terrible about this Gemara, about laying this type of blame at the feet of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkalos. Right? There's a beautiful Chassam Sofer, and the Chassam Sofer says, in general, in life, you can only plan for things for which you have a frame of reference. If you have no frame of reference for something, it's very difficult to anticipate it or to proactively plan for it. And Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkalos, of course, has no frame of reference for this, right? There is nothing for this. But again, in the Ramchal's model, he understands Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkalos as an example, ultimately, of misplaced chasidus. He's so worried. People are going to think you could offer up a blemished carbon. Can't do that. People are going to think that you execute someone who inflicts someone. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkalos, sometimes, it's good not to be so pious and just do what has to get done. What has to get done over here is get that animal on the altar. Get it on the altar. You'll do tshuva afterwards. You'll figure it out afterwards. But right now, the Caesar is at your doorstep. And if you don't offer up his carbon, we are going to be in an incredibly difficult matzav. So offer it up. Get it done. But the Gemara says, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkalos will say, well, what are these examples of? These are examples of people who analyze the piety of their actions through the prism of the present and do not contemplate future repercussions or ramifications for what it is that they're doing. And the Ramchal says that's dangerous chasidus. Dangerous chasidus is when you only think about the repercussions of your actions in the present and you give no thought to what could come from the decision you are making right now. Ramchal and Zofel just, and he says, you can't analyze if something is a form of chasidus only through the prism of the present. You have to look here, you have to look there. At every angle. Suppose it's such a profound statement. You have to analyze your actions in every direction. So I will say, in order to know if something is truly chasidus, you can't just look through the prism of the present, but rather you have to look right, you have to look left, you have to look up, you have to look down, and most importantly, you have to look forward. What is going to be the repercussions of this action? If it's going to be good, then I could do it, then it's chasidus. But sometimes you could have something that is presently pious, but ultimately could have a negative repercussion in the future. The Ramchal says, under those circumstances, abstain and don't perform the action. Sometimes piety is doing something, and sometimes piety is abstaining from this. We'll also stop over here for today. We're not finished with this yet. More examples of this tomorrow. An incredibly profound idea. Shkoyach.